Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. And today I'm reviewing the Gamesir G8 Galileo, one of the best telescopic controllers that I've ever tested out. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, GameSir sent me this G8 Galileo Type-C for a fair and honest review, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. So taking a look at the back of the box here, it says it's got Hall Effect Joysticks, which is a big plus. They say it's plug-and-play adaptive USB-C, it's ultra-low latency. It's got responsive membrane buttons, so there are no micro switches on those face buttons. And precision-tuned Hall Effect triggers. They say it's got a tactile D-pad that's both crisp and comfortable. Tactile means clicky. It's got a pass-through USB-C charging port and a 3.5mm headphone jack. It's got two mappable back buttons on the very back of this thing and laser engraved texture grips. Taking a look inside the box, and the very first thing I can see is the controller, as well as some replacement joystick caps. There's also a small box tucked into the controller. Inside that box we've got a sticker and some instruction manuals, which I would recommend checking out considering there are some very important button combinations you may need to know. Here's a close-up of the three different replacement joystick caps. While I'm happy to see there are replacements and customizability, I'm unhappy to see that there aren't duplicates. So basically what'll end up happening is if you replace one joystick cap, the other one is not going to match. And here's a closer look at the Gamesir G8 Galileo in all of its glory. On the left-hand side, at the very top, we've got our view button. We've got a joystick, we've got a D-pad, a capture button, and an M button. On the right-hand side here, we've got our menu button at the very top, ABXY buttons, the joystick, as well as a GameSir button, which can be used as the home button, and it's also the connection status indicator. The USB-C port on this one is flexible, so if you tend to move your phone around a little bit, you should be okay without damaging that port. On the bottom, we've got our pass-through USB-C connection, as well as the headphone jack. On the top of this gamepad, we've got our L1, L2, R1, and R2 buttons, or LB, RB, RT, and LT buttons. And the triggers here for both L and R are analog. On the back of the controller, you can see the textured grips, as well as the mappable L4 and R4 buttons that don't do anything if you don't map them. Now, picking up this controller for the first time, and it feels very good to hold. The ergonomics are pretty good. The joysticks are in good, comfortable positions. The D-pad's in a good position. The triggers actually feel really nice. The face buttons feel good here. Everything on this controller is in a very good place and it's very comfortable to use. However, I am noticing something very interesting with each joystick. On the left joystick, it's grinding a little bit in the top right-hand corner. And on the right joystick, it's grinding a little bit in the top left-hand corner. Now, it's kind of hard to capture on camera, but if you take a look, it's the pole of the joystick grinding against that outer ring. Now, it's not unique to this controller. A lot of controllers have this problem, but it's very noticeable on this one because the rest of the joystick is so smooth. The D-pad here is clicky, and I think it feels great. When fully extended, I'd say this controller could support phones up to 7¼ inches. I measured the distance here. And fully extended, it's also pretty stable. I was surprised. I thought it'd be a little bit more wiggly here, but it's holding together pretty good. From a quick size comparison perspective, here's the G8 against a whole bunch of other expandable controllers. Interestingly enough, most of these are GameSir. There is a Moga mixed in, and in terms of comfort here, the most comfortable one by far is the G8 Galileo. I mean, taking a completely unbiased approach, the G8 Galileo is one of the most comfortable expandable controllers I have ever used. Now, one of the problems I immediately discovered trying to plug a phone into this controller is if you've got a case on your phone, it's probably not going to fit. For reference here, this is a Samsung Galaxy S22 Plus. And it does have a case on it, and with that case, this USB-C connector is not fitting at all. And if I were to jam it in, I'm probably going to damage the phone and also the controller. I mean, I did my best here to line everything up, and considering the USB-C connector on the controller is flexible, I was kind of hoping for the best. However, based on my testing here, if I moved my phone incorrectly, I would be worried I'd break the USB-C connector. On a somewhat positive note though, the phone grips on this controller worked even with the phone in a case, which is a big plus. However, if you take your phone out of the case, it should fit absolutely fine. I mean, this is a Red Magic 6R and the camera bump isn't the smallest on it, and it fits nicely into this controller. However, there is something that's bothering me, and that's the fact that the phone can slide up and down fairly easily, which may lead lead to damage of that USB-C port. This controller is equipped with 3 different modes: PS mode, Android mode, and G-Touch mode. And interestingly here, by default it boots into PS mode, which is weird. It should have booted into Android mode, at least in my opinion. Anyways, checking out the joysticks, and they are extremely responsive. They are very accurate, and they rotate in a full 360-degree fashion as opposed to a square box that some of them do. They are reading very well, and there's not a lot of latency here. Now, I will say, since this did boot into PS mode by default, the button configurations are completely messed up. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't read the instruction manual, this controller may present a bit of a headache. You may think it's broken out of the box. The color of the LED around the home button in the bottom right-hand corner of the controller lets you know what mode you're in. It's showing here as light blue, which GameSir says is white, which is PS mode. Green is Android mode, and to change this is pretty simple. You hold the view and menu buttons for 2 seconds and that changes mode. And now you can see that mode has changed to green, and now I'm in Android mode. By doing so, all of the buttons are reading correctly and everything is good to go here. If you don't change it, you can manually map these buttons in emulators and you should be okay, but you might experience a few headaches. Now, taking a look at the pass-through charging feature, and it seems to work absolutely fine. It takes a second for the phone to read the charger, but at the same time here, it's charging without issue. Overall, in terms of accuracy with the joystick and D-pad, I was pretty happy with it. Playing Street Fighter here, I had no issue whatsoever executing any moves. I will say the D-pad and joystick on this might be polarizing to some, but I was a little bit sloppy here and things were still coming out okay. So let's quickly recap what I liked and what I didn't like about the G8 Galileo and whether or not I think it's worth it. And we'll start out here with what I liked. So first and foremost, and this is super subjective, but I love the overall look and feel of the controller. I love the SNES-inspired colorway. I think it looks great and it really pops. I also thought this controller was very comfortable to use for extended periods of time. I used it for hours on end and didn't have any issues. I'm a fan of the Hall Effect joysticks and triggers on this. The buttons, the D-pad, it all feels pretty good. The controller itself does not feel cheap. I like that it has pass-through charging, the 3.5mm headphone jack, and the movable Type-C port, although I do wish the Type-C port was extendable as well, so you can use a case with this. I'm also a big fan of the fact that you don't need to install an app to enjoy this controller. You can change button mappings on the fly, and that is huge. I hate installing apps specifically to configure a controller. A cool feature, at least to me, is that this does have magnetic faceplates. They're pretty easy to take off and they grip very well. I'm a big fan of this, not necessarily for customization reasons, but for cleaning reasons. It's very easy to keep this controller clean. And although I only use this controller for Android, it does have different modes here, including PS mode for PS Remote Play. And that brings me over to my dislikes. And the first thing on my list here is the fact that this boots into PS mode by default. I'm assuming, and it's a pretty big assumption, that most people are buying this to play with Android devices. I could be wrong. Maybe there's a reason it defaults into PS mode, but I'm thinking if you don't know how to switch modes here, if you don't read instruction manuals, if it's a parent buying it for a kid, they may only leave it in PS mode and have compatibility issues. Although I like the concept of the movable Type-C port, I wish it moved around a little bit more. GameSir, if you're watching this, make the port move up and down and left and right. It'll fit more phones, it'll fit phones with cases, and it'll be less risk of damage if the phone does move around or flop out. For example, it was very easy for me to twist my phone left and right in this case, and the port here does not move left and right. I'm not really a fan of the GameSir app on the Google Play Store, and I tend not to use it when I can. Fortunately, I don't have to use it with this controller, but at the same time here, if you're a big fan of apps for controllers, you may be let down a little bit. It is very finicky. I mean, if you don't want to take my word about the app being kind of lackluster, feel free to read the reviews right on Google Play and you can find out for yourself. And the last thing here, although I like the Hall Effect joysticks that they used and how they implemented them, I'm not a big fan of the top right-hand corner of the left joystick and the top left-hand corner of the right joystick. It grinds in the case just a little bit. I'm not quite sure what's going on here because it's smooth all the way around and it reads absolutely fine. But for some reason, just in the top right-hand corner on this left stick, there's a grinding feeling. It's not a great feeling. And the same thing on the top left-hand corner of the right stick. And I kind of wish that these were refined just a little bit more. And not to over explain this point, but if I take a look at the posts on each of these joysticks, I can see exactly where this is grinding. And I kind of wish that was picked up in QA. So at this point, you've heard my likes and my dislikes, but before I get into my verdict, let's take a look at the price. Right now, the GameSir G8 Galileo on Amazon is going for $79.99, or basically $80. So for comparison's sake, we've got the backbone controller, which is a little bit more expensive. The GameSir X2 Type-C, which is a little bit cheaper. We've got the Razer Kishi, which is more expensive normally, but it's on sale for 50% off. And we've got the PowerA Moga XP7X, which is also more expensive. So taking into account my likes, my dislikes, the price and comparables, and overall here, yes, I can recommend the GameSir G8 Galileo. This controller was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It was a pleasant surprise. I like the triggers, the D-pad, and although I have minor gripes with the joysticks, overall they're good and responsive. And this controller is comfortable for longer gaming sessions. All great aspects of a great controller. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. Shoutouts to GameSir for providing the G8 Galileo for a fair and honest review. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.